Hello everyone. So today we are going to talk about incident response and reporting. So basically, what is incidents response? In cybersecurity, we have different domain like your penetration testing domain, your blue teaming, red teaming. So incident response is something that is very important for the organization perspective, and this team is something which is actually keeping a hold of your different types of incident threats. They are making certain reports. So any one of you have ever aware about this term, that incident response team, or anything related to this? You can write in the chat box whether it's yes or no. So, incident response is something that actually belongs to your blue team domain, where you have to create a proper incident response report in which you have to mention different mitigation steps for different types of threat, and whether that threat is actually causing the impact on the organization, and you have to prioritize the risk as well, and then that proper documented report you are going to send to the client. So how this incident response is actually working and what is this incident response, we are going to talk about it. So today focus of our point is that what is actually incident response. So that's the basic introduction. Then what are certain frameworks an organization will use for incident response, or either you can say for the blue teaming perspective, because so far we have learned different stuff, and we are very much aware that organization who have to follow each and every regulations, but based on the need there are different frameworks. So now we are also going to see what are the certain frameworks as a blue teaming that organization should apply, and they have to follow certain rules and regulation based on this framework. Also, what could be the roles, that common roles and responsibility of this incident response team, or you can say even the members. Lastly, we are seeing some of the process, because incident response itself is a vast perspective, or you can say itself is a major role when we are talking about certain risk we have to identify. So incident responder are one of the, you can say, first line in the organization perspective, and they are the very first person who is keeping an eye on this certain malicious activity or threat, and based on that they are creating a instant report, so that there will be no such kind of chaos or data breaching would happen to the organization. So they are playing a very important role in the perspective of making the organization or your data to be get more and enough secure. Now, incident response is something which actually involves a lot of people. So over here, if you can see the PPT, it's saying that incident response involves the processes, procedures, and organizations implements to identify, manage, recover from security incidents. So, how this incident response is actually helpful for the organization, because over here it's saying that it does not only include certain process or procedure, but it also implementing different type of management or different type of identification criteria, so that we can recover, easily get recover from those kind of incident, and we can make a proper security. Now why this is mandatory, or your incident response team is mandatory for an organization? Because the incident response team is something which will keep the organization much better secure by creating a proper documentation report, by checking that whether there is any unauthorized access, there is any kind of data breach going on, any kind of malware is coming or not. So incident response is something which is having a proper reference, or they are having a proper knowledge how to capture a certain threat before it could exploit the entire network or the organization. Now let's talk about their framework. So as I said, it's not a in journal framework, but it's a response framework. So over here, the most common framework the incident response is going to take is there your NIST. But in NIST we are having different categories as well. So incident response carried out the framework that is your NIST SP 861. Why? Because NIST is standing for your National Institute of Standard and Technology. So whenever we are talking about National Institute of Standards and Technology framework, basically we are having that criteria in our mind, that it is something which talks about administrator, operational level, technical level. But rather than that, this certain frameworks are involving different domain in different ways. They are providing different guidelines, different handling ways for the agencies, for the organization, so that they can have a proper you can say compliances or the procedures to apply for the organization for the smooth ongoing work, or you can say for the continuous business. Now instead of that we are having ISO, IEC, but of which you are having 27035. So in earlier sessions, as we talk about like about the framework, so we are having one of the most common frameworks which every organizations are applying, that is your ISO 27001. But over here in response framework we are having ISO, or you can say slash IEC 27035. Why? Because this particular framework is carrying certain structured approach, so that you can have a proper implementation, have a proper planning on the responses, not of the only for the responses of the threats, but for the incident responses. So this particular framework is actually carrying certain kind of management structure, preparation, detection and response. So all these four terms, that is your detection, preparation, response, incident management, these four terms come under this particular ISO 27035. So that's the reason whenever we are having incident response team, this particular framework the organization have to apply. They must apply this. So it's not a optional case, it is a mandatory, that if any organization is having certain kind of blue teaming and they are trying to provide security, they have to apply this framework, or they have to use this framework. There is no optional case. Lastly, the most common response framework we are having is SANS, but of which institutes which is handling the incident. So there are six steps you can say, or one of the best process. So the SANS institute which is providing you this following steps. So this is one of the best way to identify the response or to prepare the document based on certain incidents. So this is what some of your common response frameworks which is applied by each and every organization who is giving the security or who wants a security for their organization. Now we are having certain roles and responsibility. So over here we are having 5 different roles and responsibilities for the incident response as well. So from this category itself you can categorize that in incident response, that is in your blue teaming also, under that blue team, there is a different section, you can say incident response, and in incident response itself you are having different roles. So how vast your cyber security is, you can correlate with it simply. So the very first one is you are having incident response team. Now, what is this incident response teams? So, these are actually some of the people or the employee who are responsible for handling this incident, for preparing this documentation, and if any suspicious activity they are monitoring or they are checking in the network, they have to immediately respond to it. They have to coordinate with the higher authorities that this particular situation or scenario has been noticed which is suspicious, or there is and something like unauthorized or guest entry in the network. So this is what your incident response team actually designated to do. So every individual who is present in this incident response team, they have to keep a closer look on the network, on the organization, that what particular traffic is going, or what particular work is going, any suspicious activity is there or not. Second, we are having IT administrator. So, what is the role, or you can say responsibility, of this particular person who is having an IT administrator privilege? So, over here, the person who is having this administrator privileges, they are talking about the technical controls. Now, what would be the controls or the procedures? Like, suppose if anyone or any employee in the organization itself, they are not having the privilege to edit or modify any kind of file or document, or let's assume the person is not having the permission to change the admin reports, and if person is trying to do that and he or she is successfully able to modify that particular page, so in that case the IT administrator have to detect, and at the same point they have to provide the mitigation steps for those incident, that why the person who is not having that certain kind of privilege is able to use that privilege. So is there any misconfiguration or any privilege escalation has been going on, so they have to prepare a proper mitigation on that. So this is where your IT administrator comes, and IT administrator is something they are checking for your frameworks based on NIST, or you can say based on ISO. So they will be working under that particular frameworks. Now we are having a different role under management. So over here there will be you can say the support team or the response team, or more than 2 to 3 different teams, board members, and they will collaboratively taking certain decision how to protect the organization, how to make our security more better, and whether the design is complex or not, whether everything which has been deployed for the security purpose is pretty enough or not. So management is something which in which the incident response team member, administrator, risk members, board members, everyone will be collaboratively deciding that which resource will be utilized, how we have to make our security more better. So this is where your management will also take place under your incident response team sector. Now we are having something legal counsel and communication team. So over here anyone can simply say in the chat box that why there is a need of legal counsel and a communication between the team. You can write in the chat box that why there is a need of legal consult team and a communication should be there between the teams. Saurav, you are somewhat not 100%, but like you're 30% close to the answer. Not only for the policy, it's more than that. So anyone else could answer it. No worries if the answer is wrong. No one is going to judge you over here. No worries. So let me tell you, in roles and responsibilities, why we are having this legal concern and communication teams, because under legal concerns there will be certain peoples. Yeah, Ishwar, it's regarding your CSP, that is your content security policy. So, the legal consult team member will be taking care of all your rules, laws, and regulation, whether all the incident or your security team or your incident response team, which is working 24 by 7, whether they are following all the norms, all the rules and regulations or not. So if at any certain point the client is um, giving you a charge, or any vendor is coming straight forward and saying or claiming that your organization is not provided with certain instructions or certain remediations to me, and that's the reason I have lost my data, or there has been breach to my organization, this legal consult team will be one who will checking that whether you have done all the proper setups or all the rules, you can say, or the frameworks which is been under the laws, that you have properly followed or not. And if it has been successfully done, so what's the issue? So everything which is about your legal consultancy, so this legal consult team will be taking care of that. So this frameworks, or we are saying that GRC, that is your governance risk compliance, your threat, your incident. So everything, like any kind of framework compliances, any kind of policies, procedures, laws and regulations which you have to follow on a normal basis, this will be taken care by this legal consult team. And if any kind of violation is been seen in the organization or outside the organization with the vendor, they will be taken charge by this legal consult team. So that's the reason that every security team or every cyber security is having a legal consult team which is taking care of all this. Now lastly, we are having communication teams. So in security, when we are talking about the incident, the threat, the risk, these vulnerabilities, so how, as a person or as an individual employee, you will going to report this particular incident to the vendor or to the client? So on normal basis, the organization is providing their internal mail, or you can say certain ways to connect to the client, so that you can notify the stakeholders or the vendors that this is the certain mitigation steps for this particular threat, or this suspicious behavior has been observed at your end. But what if your higher authorities, like your seniors, are not present at certain moment? So how you are going to communicate with the person, or to the client or to your vendor? So at that time the internal member should have like mail, phone numbers, or any kind of means or ways to communicate to the stakeholders. So at any certain point, if they require to get an immediate action, like if there is certain 0 day vulnerability, so at that point there is an immediate action needed, that the attacker is standing at your door, you have to shut down your system, or you have to quickly change the certain configuration setup, or you have to close certain ports. So at that time there should be a communication. So this bridge between internal and external communication with the employee to the client, this is going to take care with this way. So there should be a team who should make sure that at certain scenarios the communication should go properly. So there will be no certain breaches, or you can say zero day attack will happen. So that's how the communication is going in the incident response team. So this is what your roles and responsibilities as an individual in the incident response team. Now let's talk about the process. So before going to the process, any one of you having any kind of questions about what is incident response team, or regarding the framework, roles, responsibilities? Great. If no questions are there, we can go with the process. So, if you can remember, just right now I have said under the response framework, the last framework which we are talking about, that there are 6 different steps provided by the SANS Institute. So those 6 steps are in front of you right now. So these are some of the common steps, you can say, which an incident response team have to carry out in any kind of incident threats they are observing. Dilip Kumar has a red team member. You like it's depend on what is your role. So assume you are the network penetration tester. So at that time you have to make a certain scenario. So at that time you have to make a certain scenario, or you have to prepare a simulation environment where you can uh, check that any kind of vulnerability is present in the network or not, or any kind of chances that a backdoor entry, whether the system is compromised or not, or you have to check all the ways that at any certain point there is a chances that whether the attacker can get entry to the organization or not. And if yes, there is possibility, you have to provide a proper documentation, a proper proof that there are chances that your organization could get in certain breaches, or in certain kind of attack. So as a red team member, it's your responsibility to perform penetration testing after certain time periods by creating certain simulations environment. So this is actually red team members are doing. So over here, over red team, it depends like whether you are in the vulnerability assessment team, or you are in the threat hunting team, or you are in the threat analyst department, or you are in the penetration domain, or in which penetration you are working. Because in penetration itself there are different penetration testing, like your network, web application, web servers. So this is what your responsibility comes under in the red teaming. So I hope you are clear with your question, Dilip. Great. So these are the 6 steps which SANS Institute has given for the incidents response. Sorry. The very first is preparation. So from the name itself we can correlate that preparation is something about we have to make a planning, we have to make a procedures, we have to make a plan, we have to work accordingly. So over here in the very first phase, what we are doing, or the incident response team is doing, they are preparing a document where they will be making certain plans based on the daily basis, like your micro planning, macro planning, whether you have to, how you have to check the reports, how you have to check for certain threats, for the 0 day vulnerabilities, for the suspicious activity. So all these different ways that the attack could happen, and as an incident responder you have to keep a constant eye on it. This all this plan will be under your very first phase, that is your preparation. Second is the most important phase, that is your detection. So over here you have to be proactive, not even active, you have to be proactive, that any kind of potential threats you are identifying, or you are verifying that this is certain kind of threat which have been earlier seen and it's now again being active. At that time you have to detect those kind of threats, whether it's the unusual behavior or it's a common scenario in that organization going on. So you have to properly detect the you can say vulnerability, because sometimes there are a lot of false alerts, because nowadays the organizations are using all the automated AI based tool to save the time. So that's the reason the majority of the time you are facing false alert. So you have to check whether it's actually a potential threat for the organization or whether it's a false alarm. Third, you are having containment. So containment is something where, like assume you are have identified certain kind of attack, or certain kind of, not attack but certain kind of vulnerability. So to prevent that attack within that organization, what you are going to do, you are going to isolate that particular environment so that any effect of that particular attack would not happen to the different assets or to the different network present there. So this will help you from the unauthorized access and causing a lot damage to the organization. So isolation is something which is actually helping you to prevent your network, your asset being more damaged, from getting more damage to from that particular kind of attack. Now we are having eradication. So eradication means removing, or you can say erasing that particular kind of cause or problem from the network or from the system, and making that network or system secure. So eradication basically talks about how you can make your system secure by removing the root cause or the root problem from your network or from your system. Now we are having fifth step, that is recovery. So recovery basically talks about how you are going to address the vulnerabilities, how you are going to make sure so recovery is something which is where you are trying to make sure that all these vulnerabilities is properly identified, and all the services are running properly. So this is where your recovery take place. So recovery and eradication are both of these terms are very different. Lastly, we are having lessons learned. So why this lessons learned term is there present in the incident response process? Because after the identification of the vulnerabilities, you are trying to make a proper mitigation step, you are trying to secure the network or the system. but what you have learned from this particular incident or from this particular vulnerability, you have to make a proper documentation report, and you have to keep that report or documentation in a safe place, so that like after certain period of time, that certain threat or certain risk you are identifying again in a different network or in a different organization, at that time you will be making sure that your time is going to save, and from that particular lesson what you have learned or you have identified that which areas would be impact from this threat, you will going to make an updation earlier, and from any kind of 0 day attack there will be a prevention for the organization. So this is where your last phase lesson learned has been taken place. So this is what your process of incident response process looks like. Now lastly we are having best practices. So best practices is something which is actually talking about how well prepare the organization for any kind of detection of the vulnerability, and how they can respond it, how they can recover certain security incidents and principle on this. So one of the best way to do that is prioritize the incident, communication and continuous improvement. Why? Because if has an incident response member or has an incident response team, you're aware that there are different ways of the risk or severity, like low, medium, high, very low, that we have talked in the CV and NVD. So if you're aware that this particular suspicious behavior is under the low category, so at that time you are not going to make more focus on that, but you will be trying to make more focus on the high or the critical vulnerability score. So this will help the organization to prevent from the data breach or any kind of attack, because they are going to prioritize the attack based on their impact to the organization. So this will actually help the organizations and the incident responder team to make a proper mitigations and to act responsibly as soon as possible from the top to the bottom, like from the critical to the low. Because if you are not aware about how you have to prioritize the incident, and you are taking like 2 hours 3 hours just to provide mitigation steps on the low, so at that time you're wasting the organization time and your time. Second, we are having communication. So communication is something which is very mandatory for the incident response team. So they have to frequently communicate internally and as well as externally with the stakeholders, with the vendors, to prevent their organization and provide one of the best security measures, so that there will be no data breaches, because you're protecting data which is present over the net. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sure that the data which is available on the internet is being prevented by the organization, and that organization is trustworthy. So that's how you're trying to gather more and more consumers, that you are having one of the best security policies, and you are giving one of the best security measures, so that there will be no breaches or threat or your data is going to compromise. So that's the reason you should have a proper communication, not only internally with the organization but also externally if needed. Now, continuous improvement. So how you are going to provide improvement? So for continuous improvement, there should be board meetings, management meeting, where you can raise your points, that whether the risk, how high is the risk, whether you have to invest on this particular problem or not. So this is where your continuous improvement take place, which is actually your business continuity plan. So for the ongoing or the smooth going of your business, you have to make sure that you are following all the norms or all the frameworks and all the proper process which is provided by the SANS Institute. So those are the 6 steps which you have to carry out properly. And the last step or the most important step, that is your post incident, what you have learned from this particular thread. So you have to make a proper note or document of it. So this will actually help you to provide a continuous improvement for the organization and for your personal growth as well. So if anyone having any kind of questions or doubt, you can ask. Guys, attendance link has been shared with you. Kindly fill your attendance. Yes, like if you really wanted to go for the threat detection, you have to get some knowledge about aiming. So you have to go for the SOC analyst. So from that team, you can get a lot of knowledge that different kind of threats on and how you are going to keep a eye on it. And for threat detection, it will be one of the very useful way.